Questions?
Ah, yes.
She wants to hear about the joy.
Yeah. It's so interesting. It's like I thought I was prepared because I hadn't had any joy the first night. It's rather like asking a question of the I Ching. You have to be really careful to ask the genie the right question. And it showed me some joy by I became an infant laying on the earth for the rest of the night. And it's rather difficult to be an infant, actually. But it was a sense of total overwhelming joy. But it was so much that I had not meditated long enough or done other spiritual practices long enough to be able to deal with the infinite bliss that seemed to be bestowed upon me. So it was almost like, oh, you want some bliss? I'll give you some bliss. Here's some bliss. And, and it was a very, very difficult experience, in fact.
How much consciousness do you have in that experience? And how much control do you have?
Well, again, I can only speak for myself because it has variable effects on different people. But the first night I drank ayahuasca, I had an experience where it was going very badly. And I got a voice that said, how do you want it to go? And it was a moment of absolute creative freedom where I realized that I was a participant in this process. So control, not so much. Ability to participate, maybe akin to surfing a 30-foot wave. Very much so. The analogy that I would use is that it was very much like a lucid dream, in which I knew that I was dreaming. I was participating in a dream universe, but somehow that dream universe fed back onto my psyche and my soma.
Pete, write that down. Lucid dream tagline, right there. Questions?
Unintended pun. I apologize. A Freudian slip.
We have it now. It's on tape. Other questions? There's a question.
That's very kind. Thank you.
When I was 14 years old, I died. I was linked to it, but I was in Eastern Europe, so I was brought. I want to know what you think happens to your consciousness when you die.
What kind of a stake do you have in the answer to this question?
Let's repeat the question. So she died, came back to life, and wants to know what he thinks happens to consciousness in death.
Absolutely nothing happens to consciousness after death. Because I am persuaded through my experience and my reading of a different philosophical tradition that in fact consciousness is a worthy mental experiment to think that actually consciousness comes before matter rather than consciousness coming out of matter, right? The usual way we think of consciousness is that, Big Bang happened, all this stuff spreads out, we start to get evolution under the pressure of thermodynamics on Earth and possibly elsewhere. And in that evolution, some of the lucky organisms get to know that they're going to die, right? And my perspective, which is a heterodox one, but which is shared by the great American sage Franklin Merrill Wolff, who was a mathematician and philosopher in the early 20th century, also contemporary physicist Amit Goswami, among others, posits precisely the opposite, which is that matter is actually the kind of void or congealed consciousness. It's the absence of consciousness. And that we have four psychological states: the state of waking, the state of dreaming, the state of dreamless sleep, and the fourth state that observes them all. That fourth state will persist. That's good news, in case you wondered.
Okay, we'll have one more. that didn't sound like good news to me. That's, and one more quick question.
Okay, so we know that ayahuasca, the experience of that, also can fast forward experiences that people have in other mystical states. How do you think, or have you studied it or analyzed how people can create the healing that you experienced in other advanced mystical states without taking ayahuasca?
Yes. The question is, we understand that you were, I'm paraphrasing, but you were lucky enough to have this experience of getting healed by this ayahuasca plant teacher. What about being able to have mystical states like this and healing states like this without the use of ayahuasca? Thank you for the question. It's exactly where the place that I inhabit today. I have been working to practice non-dual meditation ever since, even before I went to Peru. But it's my experience now, having been working with a teacher and working with other people who have worked with that teacher, that often psychedelics, first of all, are neither necessary nor sufficient to the experience. And second of all, that what they really did for me, was introduce me to the much vaster bandwidth of our conscious experience, which can then be learned to be visited, if you will. And so now, the little parentheses that Julian had was, we hope he brought enough for the rest of the class, which is that we've all got a wonderful capacitor for consciousness alteration right on our shoulders. And all we need to do is learn how to focus our awareness and our attention on how to alter our own minds. And there's a well-established literature on the effects of long-term meditation. And recently, it has been correlated with the more recent studies on psilocybin mushrooms. And the two states some people are arguing that the two states are beyond similar, that they're identical. So what I'm interested in is the kind of two-step between people who seem to need this psychedelic tool, but then that not being sufficient, you have to integrate that experience into your everyday life and into maybe perhaps a spiritual practice that makes sense of it and frames it. I hope that answered your question.
And we can read more in Darwin's Parmacy. So, Richard Doyle, thank you very much. Terrific, really beautiful.